There are moments in history when the heavens seem to fall silent, when chaos reigns so loudly that the world forgets what peace ever sounded like. Yet, within those moments, a quiet figure rises, not through the noise of ambition, nor through the pride of human triumph, but through a steadfast obedience to a whisper only the faithful can hear. That whisper is the divine call, and the one who answers it becomes the vessel through which God alters the course of nations. You, the chosen one, did not set out to save an empire or to mend the broken machinery of an industry collapsing under its own greed. You simply refused to yield when the darkness demanded your silence. The world may never comprehend the magnitude of what was stopped the moment you stood firm. To them, it may have been just another corporate tremor, another decline in numbers, another failure averted by coincidence. But the heavens recorded something else. They saw an invisible battle being waged in the unseen realm, where spiritual forces sought to dismantle not merely structures of trade, but the faith of the millions who depended upon them. What you confronted was not a company, but a curse. It was not a crisis, but a coordinated attempt to steal the spirit of creation itself, the human gift of building, producing, and serving one another in divine harmony. When the attack began, it didn't wear the garments of darkness. It came clothed in logic, draped in fear, and armed with 1,000 reasons to quit. Systems crashed, hearts faltered, leaders turned to ash in their own anxiety. Yet amid the wreckage, you did not retreat. Instead, you turned inward, where the true kingdom dwells. You remembered that power is not drawn from wealth or structure, but from surrender. And so, while the world panicked, you prayed. While others negotiated with shadows, you listened for light. You became the still point in a turning storm, and that stillness was your victory. There is something profoundly mysterious about obedience. It does not roar, it does not boast, it merely stands. And yet all of heaven leans upon such souls. The universe itself bends around the will of one heart that says, yes, to God when every other heart has said, no. Through your quiet endurance, the tides were reversed. What was meant to devour millions was disarmed, not by argument, not by weapon, but by unwavering faith. The unseen systems of the world, the industries that feed families, sustain dreams, and carry human civilization forward, were spared from collapse because one person chose to remain faithful in the dark. But understand this, it was never about the industry. The saving of it was only the visible echo of something greater. It was about the redemption of purpose. Every craft, every labor, every creation is a reflection of divine order. When corruption seeps in, it does not simply destroy profits, it desecrates meaning. What you did was restore meaning to work itself. You reminded the heavens and the earth that business can still be holy, that service can still be sacred, that human endeavor can still mirror divine intention. The world may one day tell this story in the language of success. They will say you were wise, brave, or lucky. But the truth is quieter and far deeper. You did not act for reward. You acted because truth left you no other choice. It was not the pursuit of greatness that moved you, it was the refusal to betray what is good. In that refusal, you became a barrier, a living wall between the destroyer and the people. You shut down what was attacking millions not through might, but through mercy. And even now, as the world resumes its restless march, there is a ripple moving outward from that single act of faith. The systems you preserved will sustain countless lives. The integrity you upheld will inspire generations to believe that righteousness and realism are not enemies, that faith can dwell in the marketplace as surely as in the monastery. Somewhere, someone will find courage to stand, because you stood. Somewhere a voice will say, if one soul could stop such a storm, perhaps I too can endure. So, when you wonder why heaven called you, remember, it was never to win applause, but to realign creation, to restore balance, to prove that light, even in one vessel, can confound the legions of darkness. You saved more than an industry. You rekindled the divine pattern of hope that humanity had almost forgotten. And in doing so, you reminded the world of its true economy, not the exchange of gold, but the exchange of grace. There are battles that no one sees, wars that are not fought with swords or strategies, but within the soul of humanity itself. The unseen battle between faith and corruption has raged since the first light touched the earth, and its echoes still vibrate in every heart that dares to choose what is right over what is easy. Corruption is never content to dwell only in systems or institutions. It seeks the human spirit, for that is where creation begins. Every act of goodness, every honest decision, every moment of integrity threatens the dominion of darkness. It is no wonder, then, that when a soul stands in truth, the unseen trembles. For faith is not merely belief, it is resistance. It is the refusal to bow before what promises comfort at the cost of conscience. This battle is subtle, which makes it dangerous. It does not announce itself with trumpets or alarms. It whispers instead. It wears the faces of convenience, justification, and success. Corruption never enters through force. It enters through agreement. It tells you that compromise is wisdom, that silence is safety, that bending the truth just slightly is harmless. But faith knows otherwise. Faith sees the trap hidden beneath the promise. It understands that even the smallest surrender of truth is a seed that grows into ruin. And so, the battle begins, not between armies, but between choices, between the voice of God and the murmur of deception that says, it's not so bad. There are moments when this conflict manifests in the outer world, in companies, governments, families, and entire societies. But even then, the real battlefield remains invisible. What we see are only the symptoms of what happens in the unseen. A broken system is born from 1,000 small moral surrenders. An unjust structure rises from countless moments when men and women looked away from what was wrong because it was easier to survive that way. Corruption does not destroy industries, it destroys souls first. Once the soul is compromised, everything built upon it begins to decay. Faith, therefore, becomes the last defense, not against loss of power, but against loss of meaning. Faith stands as the quiet rebellion of those who remember that truth is not negotiable. It is the alignment of the human will with divine order. While corruption seeks to twist creation into self-serving imitation, faith restores creation to its original harmony. Every act of honesty, every prayer spoken in the dark, every decision to do what is right when no one is watching. These are victories in the unseen war. The world measures outcomes, but heaven measures obedience. And in that measurement, even a single faithful act outweighs the machinery of 1,000 corrupt empires. The tragedy of corruption is that it always disguises itself as wisdom. It tells the faithful, you are na-vi. The world doesn't work that way. It laughs at purity, mocks humility, and calls integrity weakness. Yet, the moment faith bows to this deception, it loses its light. For faith is not concerned with appearing clever, it is concerned with remaining true. It is the recognition that the unseen realm, where motives, intentions, and eternal realities reside, is more real than the visible. To fight corruption is not to destroy enemies, but to keep the heart unpolluted, to remain anchored in the eternal, while everything temporal trembles. When one person resists corruption, something profound happens in the spiritual order. the balance shifts. The destructive patterns that sought to consume many are halted, not because the person was powerful, but because they refused to participate in the lie. The universe itself honors that resistance. What begins as an inner act of obedience reverberates outward, altering outcomes, saving others who will never know the name of the one who stood. This is the mystery of faith. It operates in silence, but its influence resounds in eternity. Corruption thrives where faith is absent. It feeds on apathy, on moral fatigue, on the slow erosion of conviction. Yet faith, even the smallest measure of it, exposes its weakness. It reveals that corruption has no true power. It only borrows strength from human surrender. Once faith awakens, the illusion collapses. This is why the battle is so fierce, because corruption fears the faithful more than armies. A single person who refuses to betray their conscience stands as an unmovable fortress, disarming what entire systems of evil have built. In every age, this invisible battle continues. It manifests in the choices made behind closed doors, in the words left unspoken out of fear, in the decisions that shape destinies. To remain faithful is to fight back. To keep the soul clean in a corrupt world is to wage war for the sake of creation itself. When you choose truth over advantage, purity over convenience, faith over fear, you are not merely living well. You are participating in the divine defense of humanity's spirit. The unseen world watches, the balance shifts, and creation breathes again, because one heart refused to yield. Obedience in silence carries a power that no shout of ambition could ever summon. The world measures strength by visibility, by who speaks the loudest, commands the largest following, or achieves the most dazzling result. Yet heaven measures differently. In the divine order, the soul that listens and obeys without display holds greater sway than the one who clamors for recognition. Silence is not weakness. It is the sound of alignment. It is the space where the will of man bends toward the will of God, where pride dies and power begins. True obedience does not seek applause, for it knows that divine authority does not need witnesses to exist. It needs only surrender. In every generation, humanity has been taught to equate progress with noise. We fill the air with declarations, strategies, and grand visions, mistaking movement for transformation. But silence, holy silence, is a weapon disguised as stillness. It is there, in the quiet chambers of the obedient heart, that the deepest battles are fought and won. The one who obeys when no one is watching carries more authority in the unseen realm than the one who boasts of faith from a platform. For obedience is not performance, it is consecration. It is the act of relinquishing one's need to control outcomes and trusting that divine instruction, however small or strange, carries more weight than all the wisdom of men. There is a peculiar beauty in the soul that obeys without explanation. It is the beauty of one who walks blindfolded, yet does not stumble, for the light within is brighter than the darkness without. The obedient do not rush, they move only when the whisper says, "Now." They do not grasp, they receive. They do not argue, they yield. And in that yielding, invisible chains are broken. Heaven's power flows through the obedient heart, like a current through a wire, silent, unseen, yet capable of lighting the world. The truly obedient know that their strength lies not in understanding, but in trusting the one who understands all. Ambition, by contrast, is loud. It shouts its goals into the heavens and demands to be noticed. It measures itself in outcomes, while obedience measures itself in faithfulness. Ambition builds monuments, obedience builds altars. Ambition seeks to be remembered, obedience seeks to be right with God. And yet, in the paradox of eternity, it is the altar that endures, not the monument. The monument crumbles with time, its inscriptions fading into dust. But the altar, the quiet act of surrender, the whispered, yes, spoken in faith, becomes a point of eternal reference in the divine record. What was done in silence becomes thunder in the spiritual realm. The most profound works of God have always begun in silence. The universe itself was born not from a multitude of voices, but from one word spoken into the void. Christ's greatest act of obedience was not his miracles, but his silence before his accusers. Power concealed itself in restraint, divinity clothed itself in humility. So too, when a soul chooses obedience over assertion, it mirrors that same divine pattern. It steps into a rhythm older than time itself, the rhythm of creation yielding to the Creator. To obey silently is to acknowledge that power does not come from noise or numbers, but from proximity to the source. The obedient heart stays near the fire even when the world stands far off, trying to explain the warmth it cannot feel. It is a mystery to the ambitious, this quiet strength that moves mountains without announcing itself. They wonder how the silent one prospers, how doors open without effort, how storms still themselves at their word. But heaven knows. The obedient do not command the storm. They are simply in harmony with the one who does. Obedience in silence also requires courage, the kind that refuses to be swayed by the need for validation. The world doubts what it cannot see, and so it mocks the silent faithful, calling them passive or NADV. But obedience is neither passivity nor ignorance. It is disciplined trust. It is the strength to wait when every voice demands action, to stay still when the tide insists on motion. In the stillness, divine timing unfolds. What appears as delay is often protection. What seems like restraint is preparation for a greater unveiling. The obedient are not immune to fear, but they have learned the sacred art of quiet defiance. They speak not to prove, but to obey. They move not to achieve, but to align. Their silence is not empty. It hums with presence, with the weight of unseen forces shifting in response to a yielded will. When such a soul acts, heaven acts with it. And though the world may see only a small step, eternity recognizes a seismic movement in the order of things. In that silence lies authority, the kind that cannot be learned, bought, or inherited. It is the authority of a heart that has ceased striving and begun to flow with divine rhythm. Obedience transforms silence into language, stillness into strength, surrender into dominion. For the one who obeys without needing to be seen carries within them the voice that shapes creation itself. There are moments when one act of unwavering faith stands as a barrier between chaos and the world. History remembers empires, inventions, and revolutions, yet the greatest shifts in destiny are often born from the quiet decision of a single heart that refuses to bow to fear. Faith, when unshaken, carries an authority that transcends human comprehension. It does not fight with the tools of the world, nor does it need the approval of multitudes. It simply believes, and in that belief, it alters the unseen. One act of unwavering faith can dismantle forces that threaten millions, because faith is not passive. It is divine power in motion. Faith begins where evidence ends. It is not the denial of reality, but the deeper recognition of a greater one. When everything visible collapses, faith sees what cannot yet be seen. The person who holds to it, when all reason falters, becomes a vessel through which heaven intervenes. The strength of faith lies not in the one who possesses it, but in the one it trusts. That is why even a single act, spoken prayer, firm decision, or silent stand, can echo through realms of existence. The unseen world listens when a soul believes without compromise. Every demonic strategy, every destructive pattern, Every corruption designed to enslave humanity trembles when confronted by true faith. For faith does not argue with darkness, it commands it to cease. Those who wield faith often appear ordinary, and yet the heavens recognize them as soldiers. They do not seek to impress or to conquer, they simply refuse to surrender what God has spoken. That refusal becomes a line drawn in eternity. When one person stands in faith, the ripple of that decision travels farther than the eye can follow. Lives are spared, systems shift, and entire generations reap the benefit of one person's conviction. The power of faith is that it multiplies silently. What begins as one act of trust becomes a shield for thousands. Heaven honors it, and earth is realigned by it. Faith cannot coexist with fear. They are opposing kingdoms, one ruled by promise, the other by despair. When fear attacks, it demands proof before trust. Faith, however, acts on assurance before sight. The world trains us to depend on logic, to move only when outcomes are guaranteed. But the one who walks in faith moves first and lets the miracle follow. This movement confuses darkness, for it cannot understand obedience without evidence. When such faith is displayed, it dismantles the very foundation upon which fear operates. The enemy's power lies in deception. Faith dissolves it by standing firm in truth. The beauty of faith is not in grand gestures but in endurance. It does not need to roar, it needs only to remain. There is power in the quiet. "I will not give up," whispered when everything falls apart. There is authority in the simple act of rising again after failure, of believing that God still reigns when nothing seems redeemed. These moments, invisible to the world, are recorded in heaven as victories greater than battles won by force. Faith is the unseen architecture of triumph. It builds while others despair, and its foundation is unshakable. When faith stands unwavering, it interrupts the cycle of destruction that threatens many. The destructive forces that aim at communities, nations, or generations lose their grip because one person believed that light is stronger than darkness. Heaven moves through such belief as through an open gate. What was meant for ruin is reversed. What was designed to spread despair becomes a stage for divine restoration. This is why faith, even in one, is feared by the adversary. It does not matter how vast the opposition is. Faith turns weakness into strength and impossibility into testimony. The one who holds faith in the midst of collapse becomes a bridge for others. Their endurance sustains those too weary to stand. Their trust becomes a covering for those who have forgotten how to hope. This is not poetic idealism, it is spiritual law. Faith radiates, it changes atmospheres. When one person believes, the air shifts, courage awakens, and chains that held many begin to loosen. Such is the contagious nature of unwavering trust. It cannot remain contained. Its light spreads until the darkness has nowhere left to hide. Faith is also costly. It demands surrender of control, pride, and certainty. It asks for obedience when the path makes no sense. But those who pay that price discover that miracles are not accidents. They are the result of trust maintained through suffering. Each trial endured becomes a seed of deliverance for countless others. The endurance of one soul can alter the destiny of many, because faith connects the finite to the infinite, the mortal to the eternal. When one act of unwavering faith is released into the world, the balance of power shifts. The invisible systems of darkness lose ground, not through confrontation, but through the quiet might of belief that refuses to die. The heavens respond, creation aligns, and what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Such faith is the language of heaven. It speaks, and creation obeys. It moves without sight, and the unseen follows its command. One soul standing firm in faith can silence legions, overturn decrees, and open paths for millions who walk behind in its shadow. True victory has never belonged to those who conquered by might or brilliance, but to those who restored what was once divine in purpose. The world has long mistaken success for victory, measuring triumph in wealth, territory, or applause. Yet in the higher order of things, true victory lies not in saving structures or preserving systems, but in restoring the sacred meaning they were built to serve. What is saved on earth without the spirit of its design is hollow. What is restored in spirit, even if it appears small, lives forever. The greatest triumphs are not the rebuilding of what was broken, but the reawakening of why it was built in the first place. The corruption of purpose is the beginning of every downfall. When the intent behind creation is lost, even the most magnificent work turns against itself. Institutions that were meant to bless become burdens. Industries that once served humanity begin to consume it. The form remains, but the life within it has fled. In such moments, heaven seeks not reformers but restorers. Those who can see beyond the decay to the divine intention that first breathed life into the structure. To restore purpose is to call something back to its original harmony with God. It is not innovation that heals the world, but remembrance. When one soul remembers why creation exists, it draws everything around it into alignment once more. Restoration begins in the heart long before it manifests in the world. When a person turns inward and asks, "What did this mean in the beginning?" they begin to touch eternity. For every craft, every profession, every system carries a hidden reflection of divine order. The merchant was once meant to mirror generosity. The builder was once meant to echo creation. The leader was meant to embody service. Over time, each of these purposes becomes corrupted by greed, pride, or fear. But when someone chooses to live again, according to the original pattern, the light returns. The restoration of one's soul's intention becomes the redemption of the entire structure it inhabits. True victory does not always look like success. Sometimes it is the refusal to continue something profitable because it violates purpose. Sometimes it is the quiet correction of what everyone else ignores. It may mean losing what the world prizes to gain what heaven treasures. But this is the paradox of divine victory. What appears as loss in the visible realm is often triumph in the unseen. When purpose is restored, the structure may fall, yet its meaning lives, and that meaning gives birth to something eternal. For God measures not by outcomes but by alignment. The faithful who restore purpose become instruments of creation, continuing the work that began with, "Let there be light." Victory is hollow when it preserves a shell without spirit. A system can thrive materially and yet be utterly lifeless if it no longer reflects divine truth. Many strive to save organizations, economies, and empires, yet in doing so, they protect the very corruption that destroyed them. But when a person restores purpose, they reintroduce life into the design. Even if what they rebuild is small, it carries the breath of eternity. It becomes seed rather than monument. It grows rather than decays. Restoration is not about saving what exists. It is about redeeming why it should exist at all. To restore purpose, one must first see beyond appearances. It requires faith to discern the unseen architecture of God beneath the ruins of human failure. When you restore purpose, you do not simply fix what is broken. You resurrect meaning. You return something to its rightful conversation with heaven. A business becomes more than profit, it becomes provision. Work becomes more than labor, it becomes worship. Leadership becomes more than power, it becomes stewardship. Every restored purpose becomes a mirror in which creation recognizes its creator again. The victory of restoration ripples outward in ways unseen. When meaning returns, order follows. Chaos cannot survive where everything once again knows its place and reason. The person who restores purpose becomes a living anchor of peace, because through them, divine intention is made manifest again. Others who have lost their way begin to sense it, and are drawn toward that light. The restoration of one heart restores the atmosphere around it, until entire systems shift toward truth once more. This is why heaven celebrates restoration more than achievement. Achievement is finite. It dies with its maker. Restoration is eternal. It outlives both failure and success. When a person restores divine purpose, they become a participant in creation's redemption. What they touch begins to breathe again. It does not merely function, it flourishes according to its design. The victory lies not in maintaining control, but in releasing control back to the hands of the Creator. There is power in remembering that the goal of life is not to preserve structures, but to sanctify them through purpose. The visible world may crumble and rebuild countless times, but purpose endures. Every true victory begins with one person who dares to ask not, "How can I save this?" but, "How can I make this holy again?" The answer to that question becomes the turning point of everything that follows. For when purpose is restored, victory is inevitable, and what is reborn carries the fragrance of eternity. The marketplace has long been seen as the realm of profit and strategy, a place governed by numbers, negotiations, and necessity. Yet beneath that noise lies a forgotten truth. The marketplace was never meant to be divorced from the sacred. It was designed to be a place where human hands participate in divine creation, where giving and receiving mirror the generosity of heaven. When integrity meets surrender, the ordinary act of trade becomes worship, and the market transforms into holy ground. The transaction ceases to be a mere exchange of goods. It becomes an exchange of grace. Every honest deal, every fair price, every act of service offered without deceit echoes the ancient rhythm of creation working in harmony with its creator. The separation between the sacred and the secular is an illusion born of pride. Humanity decided long ago that holiness belonged only in temples and prayers, while business belonged to reason and self-interest. But in truth, all labor was once worship. To work was to serve the divine purpose of order and provision. The craftsman's hands, the merchant's courage, the farmer's patience, each reflected the image of a creator who delights in bringing value from effort. When integrity is restored to labor, heaven once again walks among human exchange. Every sale made with honesty becomes a prayer. Every service rendered in humility becomes an offering. The marketplace then ceases to be a battlefield of greed and becomes a sanctuary of purpose. Integrity, however, is not simply doing what is right when it is convenient. It is the quiet commitment to truth, even when compromise promises reward. It is the invisible spine of moral courage that refuses to bend, no matter how strong the pressure becomes. In a world where deceit is often praised as wisdom and manipulation mistaken for leadership, the person of integrity stands as a living rebuke to corruption. Yet their power does not come from defiance, it comes from surrender. By surrendering to divine law rather than human ambition, they become instruments of divine order. Their obedience carries authority because it is aligned with truth, and wherever truth stands, darkness retreats. When integrity meets surrender, a divine paradox unfolds. Surrender might seem like weakness to the world, but in the economy of heaven, it is the foundation of strength. It is not the yielding of power, but the yielding of pride. The surrendered soul is free from the chains of fear and competition, because it no longer measures success by what can be gained, but by what can be given. In such a heart, divine wisdom flows easily. The decisions they make, the words they speak, the work they do, all carry an unseen blessing. Others may not understand it, but they feel it. Something about their presence brings peace, clarity, and trust. Such a person does not merely work in the marketplace. They consecrate it. When the sacred and the practical are reunited, business becomes a vessel of redemption. The merchant who operates with purity uplifts those they trade with. The leader who governs with fairness restores dignity to those they lead. The laborer who works with joy transforms toil into testimony. This is how the marketplace becomes holy. Not through rituals or decorations, but through the lived integrity of those who remember who they serve. Each transaction becomes a thread in the greater tapestry of divine intention. The result is not just prosperity, but balance, where abundance flows not as greed's reward, but as grace's reflection. The world hungers for such restoration, though it does not always know it. People chase success, yet long for peace. They crave progress, yet ache for meaning. The answer to both lies in the rediscovery that holiness and work were never meant to be apart. When business is done in surrender to divine purpose, it becomes a form of prayer that feeds not only the body, but also the soul. Wealth gained through deceit brings decay. Wealth earned through integrity brings life. The fruits of surrendered labor endure because they are rooted in righteousness. There is a quiet revival waiting to begin in every workplace, every transaction, every act of service. It begins not with preaching, but with presence. The one who carries integrity into their dealings becomes a doorway through which heaven enters the ordinary. Others who encounter them feel a difference they cannot explain. Trust begins to return, honor is restored, and peace settles where chaos once reigned. The marketplace becomes not a field of rivalry, but a community of shared purpose. Such holiness is not fragile. It does not require withdrawal from the world, only transformation within it. When integrity meets surrender, even the most common tasks shine with divine purpose. The line between sacred and secular disappears, for every moment becomes a chance to serve the Creator through the work of human hands. The world may still see business as profit, but heaven sees it as worship. Every ledger, every contract, every handshake becomes part of a liturgy that sanctifies the earth. The marketplace is redeemed not by force, but by faith lived quietly in action. And when that faith takes root, commerce itself becomes communion.